I gotta plug in a speaker so I can hear you better.
Okay.
But I think I'll be all right. I think I can hear you. I'm good at lip syncing or lip reading.
Lip syncing.
No, I'm not really. I'm kidding.
Well, let's do the lip syncing. That'll be fun. Well, let's start with this. When your father was growing up in Emory, they had moved into town. The city water bill was $1 a month, and they weren't able to pay that. So they had to get water from the ditch or whatever in town. And I just thought that was really interesting commentary on how oppressive the poverty was. What did your dad say about, growing up during the Depression? Is it something that he ever talked about, or?
I remember seeing him drink the water out of the ditch that just ran through the pasture where all the cows had done their duty. I don't remember him saying anything specific, but my perspective is the Depression definitely affected his perspective of life. He was no stranger to poverty. He was one of the hardest workers on the planet. He was committed to take care of his family, would not cheat a soul, which is not his style. I do remember once he told me, I don't know if it was a new year, we started a new year, what. Anyway, he said he didn't set goals. That wasn't part of his one thing he did because he didn't like feeling depressed when he didn't meet him. So my guess is the depression and the poverty that he grew up in was a significant part of creating that perspective for him. But we grew up poor. Poor as, I don't know if we were as poor as church mice, but I remember I'd get one pair of pants a year. They're supposed to last me all year long. I think they did. I can't remember.
Tell me about your grandparents, Ferry and Irene Broderick. What were they like?
So I didn't know them really well, meaning we went to their house often, but I was not a very observant child or even young adult. I didn't really pay attention to people around me that much. My grandfather, I don't know if you knew this, when he was a teenager, he moved out of the house with two of his brothers. And they were living, at the time, they lived up in Roosevelt, where their stepfather owned a store. And life was very difficult because they had brought together 7 children from one family, 5 children from another family, and then they had 5 children. So they had a bunch. And then they're trying to blend these all together. And I've read some of my great-grandmother's journal, and she was not a happy camper. That's what I got from it. And it was just the personalities and the difficulty. But anyway, that's how my grandfather grew up in Roosevelt. I don't know much about my grandmother. I think she was from, she grew up in, I think, Manti. But my grandfather, Ferry, was also a very hardworking man. Oh, one time my friends and I were on a survival camp we went down to Emory County, went down to up Wildcat Canyon, where we used to go up deer hunting up in that area. And there were 4 of us, and we each prepared a certain part of survival. Mine was building a fire. Well, I failed to get a fire built. We were up in the canyon and had found a little cave, and I couldn't get the fire started. So we hiked back down into Emory. My grandfather was killing a pig. He was hanging it. I think he was going to put it in some boiling water. He had it hanging over a pot. We helped him out, and he gave us food and matches for our survival camp. We hiked back up in the canyon and froze that night. Well, we did get a fire built, but we didn't have any blankets. But anyway, he assisted us in that. That's the most vivid memory I have of him.
Your father, he loved tools and carpentry from an early age. So how did your dad influence you, and then how did you influence Casey? Like, how did that all happen?
So my father, what he wanted to do is create a family business, very much like a co-op or kind of like the United Order. Everybody worked together. Turns out I'm the only one that actually followed for any significant time, the carpentry trade or construction. The other three boys, they just went and did their thing. I mean, they definitely had some experience. Roger and I used to, work on the roofs, putting shingles on when he was building houses down in Orem in Utah Valley. So he and I worked together quite a bit. And then Levon got involved in the heavy equipment more when I went on my mission. And so he learned to drive a D9 and stuff like that. So you ask what influence? The influence was from a very young age. I ended up going on the jobs probably as early as 10 or 11. I remember when I was about that age, I remember going to a Boulder Dam, and he was putting cabinets, but I was, like young. And so I became acquainted with the trade very early. So I was the helper, I was grab this, grab that. So it just became natural for me. I would say I was never passionate about carpentry work. I'm not like my father who knew what he wanted to do. I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up. But because I had spent so many years doing it, I became very good at it and kind of a perfectionist. And so I was able to earn a living. So I really appreciate that immensely, because that has served me well, and still, just keeping the house, remodeling it or whatever, it's just easy for me. So
if you think about your parents' relationship, I guess from the beginning onward, what impresses you about their relationship with each other?
Well, one thing is, it's interesting that my father was clear as soon as he saw my mom that that's who he wanted to marry. I find that interesting. That doesn't occur a lot. I will just share my perspective on my parents. I would say my father was not easy to live with. So that's my judgment. I'd say my mom is an angel. I am impressed that my mother, she loved him. No, there's no doubt that they loved each other. They were very gentle to each other most of the time, except when he was in a bad mood. I'm impressed that they were committed to their marriage no matter what. There were times that were very difficult. I saw some crazy stuff, go on in the house. And if I had been the wife, I probably would have left. But, she had better vision than that. I remember, as they got older, I noticed that they were very tender with each other, including my father. He was very gentle.
It is impressive that they were able to thrive together,
So it kind of reminds me of my relationship with Maggie. She tolerates me. She's sitting over here listening to me, so I'm just kind of bugging her a little bit.
Very good. You were pretty young in Hurricane, so I guess most of your growing up time was in Orem.
Yes.
So what do you remember about those years?
Probably the fondest memories in Orem were going to the Hollow. We called it the Hollow. It's a little canyon just a couple of blocks away. Picking cherries in the orchard, Jensen's orchard. I used to climb the trees a lot. Tarzan was my hero, but I used to climb the trees and practice my Tarzan yodeling. I probably thought I was pretty good at the time. I was very much involved in Boy Scouts. I was very much outdoors. And so my father was very ingenious. We had a large family, 10 children. So he came up with this bus. Well, he used it for work, but he also used it for camping. So he built a boat, would tie the boat on top of the bus, go camping like the Clampett family, you know? Except grandma wasn't up on top of the bus. But anyway, I'm sure it was an interesting sight. But we had a lot of fun fishing. So as a teenager in Orem, I spent a lot of time fishing with my father. He loved to fish. We'd go to Strawberry, fishing at Hobble Creek, you know, a few places, but I enjoyed fishing. I learned, I was fair at it, I guess. And of course, the other boys would go sometimes. Actually, one of the best parts of fishing was catching the night crawlers the night before. We'd catch hundreds of them.
Tell me about the last fishing trip you went on with your dad.
So what occurred before the fishing trip, about 1 or 2 years before the last fishing trip, is I got upset with my father and yelled at him, wasn't talking to him. We lived up Salt Lake Valley. We were down in St. George at a family event, and I got upset. We resolved that and decided to take my dad and mom out on a fishing trip. I'm thinking it was Strawberry. We had a boat back then. Maggie and I had a fishing boat, good sized fishing boat. And so went out and caught some fish. My dad was always pretty good at catching fish, but it was a good opportunity to heal our relationship. For me, anyway, that's what it was. The challenge with my father and I in our relationship is, well, I don't know if that's complicated, so I won't. It takes a long time to share that, so I won't share it. Anyway, that event gave us that opportunity to get past the little conflict we had, and until he had passed away, you know. I have the picture of the fishing trip. I'm gonna have to look at it now. I'll recognize the lake as soon as I see the picture.
The one I remember the most was when you took Jessica with you and your dad. She had a blast, especially when you guys both cast and caught each other.
Got snagged.
Yeah.
Tangled up. One of the most memorable fishing trips was the whole family went to Flaming Gorge, and we went in the bus, my dad's bus, and his wooden boat that he made, and I think we caught 90 fish. I mean, we were just hauling the fish in. Of course, there were a lot of fishing poles in the water, but we were out in the boat, you know, trolling. My father loved to troll, and so that was always what I preferred also. Rather than shore fishing, I preferred to be out in a boat.
And how old were you when the family moved to Michigan?
I was 16.
How did you feel about that move?
I liked Michigan. I made some really good friends in Michigan. Michigan was where I actually became committed to the church. I was at 16, I was reading the Book of Mormon, and that's when I, you know, made significant perspective changes on my testimony. And the interesting thing in Michigan is, so our high school was at 2,500 students. I would guess that there were maybe 25 or 30 of us that were LDS. So we were the huge minority. And so the church became our family. Yeah, I really, really enjoyed Michigan. I did not like moving back to Utah. That was challenging for me. I would have been fine staying out in Michigan.
You served your mission in Argentina?
Yes, Buenos Aires, Necochea, Mar del Plata, mostly Buenos Aires. So, you know, talking about language and missions, I went to California. My brother Roger served his mission in California, and my parents went down to pick him up. I was able to go with them. So I went down to California to pick him up, and I was talking to one of his companions, and his companion basically asked me about going on a mission, you know, and I says, or he said, like, where do you want to go? And I don't remember what he said, but he said, you want to go on a Spanish speaking mission. I said, okay. And so I took Spanish at BYU my year after high school, after graduating. So I went to BYU 1 year before I went on a mission. I took Spanish for the whole year. Ended up getting, you know, going on a Spanish speaking mission. But it's just interesting how that played out. I mean, he could very well have been inspired to say that to me. But I was better prepared, of course, having studied.
Tell me about your parents' love for singing and music?
So my father was in a quartet group when I was a teenager. He would audition also for some of the musical plays. The King and I, he was in The King and I. So we, of course, went to see it. He was a tenor and he had a fairly good voice. I mean, not professional, but he could carry his own pretty well. He really loved to sing, was pretty good with the guitar, I thought. I think one of the more very incredible things that they both did is they were in service down mostly in Emery County. They would go play at the senior citizens. Maybe it was a nursing home or both, probably both. But they would go play their instruments. And of course, they knew all of the old songs that most of the residents there would know. And so, I went a few times, and I just remember the residents being very much in gratitude for them showing up. So they were like kind of like the heroes for some of these people, to entertain and give them a break. My mother grew up in a very musical family. Their belief in their family is every child should learn a musical instrument. All of her siblings probably learned 2 or 3 musical instruments. But so she wanted us to all learn a musical instrument. And we did for the most part, I think, till we got to the last couple of children. But anyway, music was huge in the Cox family.
Are there any songs that they played that you particularly like?
Well, it's an old song, I Love You Truly. I guess the reason I like it is because it expresses how they feel about each other. When they sang it, I got the message of what they were sharing, about how they felt about each other. So I used to play the accordion with my mom a little bit. So I learned how to play the accordion. I haven't played in a few years, and I used to play some of the songs that they would play. The Wedding Waltz was one of my favorite that they played, that my mom played on the accordion. You Are My Sunshine is one I remember really well. You probably remember that one.
Yeah, certainly. Well, the other one I remember is that Little Lies I Love You song.
Oh yeah. My dad loves singing that one. They were pretty good at that. They, harmonized quite well on that song.
How about this? What attributes of your father would you like be instilled in your grandchildren?
Well, I would say a combination of two. He, as I mentioned earlier, he was definitely a hard worker, but he was committed to quality. He didn't just do stuff. He did stuff and it turned out really nice. That's what I would say would serve to, for the grandchildren to learn. And I'd say my son, he learned that quite well. Probably inherited it from his grandfather.
Casey's pretty good, huh?
Yeah. Oh yeah. So I'm just going to say that I'm a pretty good carpenter. Well, he surpassed me. I don't know if the word surpass is the right word. He passed me in his quality. He is really good. He is freaking good. Anyway, that's my perspective.
That's good. Tell me about your father's example of living the gospel.
I don't recall hearing my father swear ever. I think I heard him swear once, and he was swearing to let us know what a swear word sounded like. It wasn't that he just didn't swear. My father wanted to go on a mission for a long time. Of course, he didn't go when he was younger, but they were committed to doing that, and so they went. They must have been about 55 or 60. 55 or 60, I think, probably 60-ish. But he was always active, always paid his tithing, always, very, very committed. Very good example of that.
All right. If you could see your dad on his 100th birthday, what would you say?
First thing I would tell him is thank you. I'll be honest, my father and I didn't have the best relationship. However, I know that he absolutely loved me and all of his children, all of his family. I know that, and he showed that the best he knew how, and the way he knew how to do that was to provide for them. And so I would tell him, thank you. for that. And then also for teaching me a trade that has served so well for me. So I tell him thank you, and I would tell him that I love him. I don't know if I've ever told him that, now that I think about it. Wow, that's interesting. I would definitely want to do that. Give me something to think about.
Anything else that you would think would be good to talk about your father?
You know, my father was not afraid of doing anything, at least that I'm aware of. I don't know if you knew he was a sheriff down in Hurricane. He ran for mayor in Emory. Of course, he was a carpenter, had a cabinet shop in Hurricane and in Orem, had a cabinet shop, was a general contractor. That takes quite a bit of courage to, you know, to run a business. Was a beekeeper. I'll be honest, that's something I would never do. And it's just because I don't want to get stung, you know. He just wasn't afraid of that kind of stuff. He's very, you know, I always admired that in him, just his courage.
Well, thank you. This is fun to have an excuse to talk.
That sounds funny. Yeah, there's a time in my life when I had this kind of, I call it a genealogy bug. And it kind of seems that that's what you have, and that's pretty cool.
When I was thinking about your dad's birthday, I was like, it'd be really fun to interview my aunts and uncles and just piece that together and see what we come up with.
Well, I think you're the first person that has done that. I mean, we've given feedback to Viana when she, you know, created a family history, but I don't recall anybody doing what you've done, you know, the interview thing. Yeah, you asked some pretty personal questions.